The online care portal orientation. Aside from the touchscreen, which we were oriented to last week, there is another piece of GrandCare technology known as the online care portal. And we mentioned that the member is the one that primarily utilizes the touchscreen. And on the other hand, if you're a person that's providing support, the primary piece of technology that you'll be working with is the portal. So let's understand more about this portal. The different names that this portal can have. The Trillium portal is my understanding how you'll be calling it for most of the time. And so there are many ways to access the portal. One of those ways is to simply go into the GrandCare website, click that login button there on the top right, and you'll see a list of portals for different organizations. In general GrandCare speak, we very often refer to it, especially in training or literature, as the care portal or the online care portal or the caregiver portal. And this type of terminology emphasizes some other aspect of what this technology does, and that it's online and that it's meant to provide care. So you're providing care through this portal as a person using the portal. And caregiver portal, it further emphasizes that if you're a person giving care, delivering service, this is where you go to do the majority of your work as a remote caregiver or remote support person. Another name for this piece of technology is GC Manage. And that goes all the way down to the software programmer who's typing away the code. This is what he knows this technology as. And the reason why I even mention it here is because you may see that term, GC Manage, in some of the things that you read. Perhaps even if you access the portal, you'll come across it. And that's all it's referring to. It's the portal. And it's the software for this portal that's developed by GrandCare. It's called the GC Manage software. And it's got a version, as you can see there. Every time a new update is made to any GrandCare software, you can see what those changes are in the website releases.grandcare.com. And so here's an example of a new update to this portal that was made, which added something related to YouTube videos. And so that was from just a week or so ago. And this website, by the way, just as an aside, releases.grandcare.com is something that people could subscribe to, because it's not just updates in the portal software, but even updates to the touchscreen or in-home device software as well. The other thing that this name for the portal emphasizes is the word manage. And so when you go into the portal, you'll be able to manage different touchscreens, manage different people who can access the portal, and also be able to do a couple of other neat things, which we won't get into necessarily today, but that hence the word manage. It's a website, and therefore you can access the portal from any internet connected device that has a browser, an internet browser. Chrome, Google Chrome is preferred. And you can access it, for instance, on a laptop or a desktop or even a smartphone internet browser. So that's how you get to the portal. And notice that I didn't mention anything about accessing the portal through the touchscreen, because that is normally not how you do it. And I don't know anyone actually who does access the portal from the touchscreen, the GrandCare touchscreen. And what are the types of things that one can do in the portal? is a person providing support. So I just showed a few examples there. I want to provide support to somebody by adding prompts. As we discussed in the first Power Hour, you can provide prompts for a person that's being supported to do something like brush teeth. That's a type of operation you can do in the portal. Another type of operation that one can do in the portal, and this is again depending on the role. There are going to be different types of roles for people, which we'll discover later. If someone has the ability to look at medication or generate reports in the portal, that's how all of that happens through that technology of the website. And finally, if you want to reach a member that has a touchscreen in the residence, you would do it through the portal, going into the portal and then initiating a video call to that member from the portal. And these are 3 out of thousands of examples of things that one can do, especially depending on the different kinds of roles one may have inside the portal. And so in GrandCare speak, for the sake of this technology, when you see the word users being used in the portal, that is referring to a person who uses the portal. And an example of that would be, again, somebody who is providing care to a person who has a touchscreen. The person providing care is the person who uses the portal and therefore is referred to as the user most properly. There may be some mentions of the word user in the literature, maybe marketing literature, which could be less strict, but in the strictest sense, when we're referring to a user, we're referring to the person who uses the portal, and that's what you'll most often see in the portal itself when it's referring to a user, which means that strictly speaking, the touchscreen end user is not who we are referring to as the user. And I can understand, it's very understandable that one would want to call the member that is touching the touchscreen the end user. And loosely speaking, that is totally fine. But in terms of GrandCare speak, if you see a user in GrandCare, in the GrandCare portal, it's referring not to the touchscreen end user. In GrandCare speak, the person who uses the portal is the user. So these people who are accessing the portal, these users, they get access to the portal by being granted access by someone who already has administrative capabilities within the portal beforehand. So this administrator would be able to add a new user or a new person to be able to access the portal and fill out a form there with your information or whoever's information it is that wants to all of a sudden receive access to the portal. And that potential new user would receive an activation email to activate that user, as shown in the example here. And at the same time, if a person no longer needs access to the portal at some point, and the administrator could remove access to the portal by disabling that user. So that's more or less the life cycle. Examples of users include deployment support, for instance, in the case of programming or preparing touchscreens by customizing them or personalizing them. That activity would happen in the portal, and therefore a deployment support staff person would need access to the portal, would need to be a user. And similarly, for remote support, somebody providing remote support would need access to the portal and therefore be an example of a user of the portal. And therefore, you, in this training, you are users. If you went to GrandCare and you had administrative access to it, which not necessarily everyone here in training will, but if supposing somebody did, like myself, and I clicked on users, I would not see a list of members, but rather a list of people who can access the portal. folks like yourself. I myself have access to the portal, so I'm also on this list. But it's not just you or me. There are also the provider direct support professionals or the provider staff who also want to provide service or give care to the members, and they would do that through the portal. If they were to do things remotely, and therefore they would need access to the portal, and therefore they too would be users in the strict sense of the word. An example here is somebody who wants to pull up a report for medication compliance would do so in the portal. And what about relatives and friends who want to provide some support? In some cases, family and friends could be granted access, usually limited access to the portal, meaning that they have a limited role to do things like communicate with the member or the person who has the touchscreen via video call, as you see in the example here, or by sending messages, or very often uploading photos. And so those folks would need to be granted access to the portal, and therefore would become users as well. So all of this talk about users and providing care through the portal now begs the question, what is the member? If the member is not the user in the strict sense of the word in the portal, how is the member referred to? So we go back, we look at this theoretical or hypothetical example of, we know this is Daniel, the person receiving support, and there in the touchscreen on the other end, the remote support, Alexandra. Daniel is looking at the touchscreen and is able to see Alexandra by way of the touchscreen. Alexandra, for her part, is accessing the portal to make that video call through her own device, most likely a laptop or a desktop of some sort. And so let's look at that relationship more closely, because we know that Alexandra in this particular case would be the user in the strict sense of the word, appearing there on the touchscreen. And now we're trying to figure out how can one refer to, how does the GrandCare technology refer to the member himself? And the answer to that is resident. Resident is the term that would be used in the GrandCare portal for the member, the person that's receiving support from the user. And so Daniel, in that case, would be the resident, the one who has the touchscreen. The resident is the one who is receiving support from one or more users. And the resident is the one that will be receiving the care. And now this harkens to a question that you may have. Is there a list of residents in the portal? Just as we saw earlier that there was a list of users that one could manage. And the answer is that no, there isn't a list of residents in the portal for a user like yourself logging into the portal. If you were to look for a list of residents, you wouldn't find that. And why not? Why wouldn't we find a list of residents? Here's why. When somebody is providing support in the portal, in other words, a user is providing service, the user is doing that through the member's touchscreens. As you see in the example there, the video call or putting a prompt in the bathroom touchscreen. And so that means that a single member can have multiple touchscreens. And you see single member Daniel, in this case, we're using as a hypothetical member, has a touchscreen in the what looks like a TV room or a living room where he can video call Alexandra, the user. But Daniel, that same member, has another touchscreen in the bathroom there in the top left. So one member can have multiple touchscreens. And in this example here, you have a single resident who we fictitiously named Gen member. And the resident Gen member has two touchscreens in this case. One that is called Jen's bedroom, is in the bedroom of Jen's residence, and another touchscreen called Jen's office, which is found in Jen's office in the residence. Multiple touchscreens for a single member. And I've listed two here, but the member could have three, could have four, and so on. So we have a question about how will we differentiate from the different residents we are supporting. I will answer that. I'd like to get to just a few more slides that will be able to give meat to that answer. What you really need, if you're going to be providing support at various points of care within the residence, is a list of touchscreens, not residents in this particular case. You can indicate who the resident is in the name of the touchscreen, as is indicated here. The name that's been given is just the first name, but you could also give the last name as well, or the first initial, if that helps. And you'll notice as well that there are other indicators in this list, a number corresponding to the touchscreen's ID. And even at the bottom of the name of the touchscreen, there's something that has what looks like an address as well. We won't get into that just yet. We'll describe that at a later time. But just in the description of the various touchscreens in this case, in this particular home, you can see quite a bit already about the person that you are supporting. You might remember this slide from last time. And there we were talking about the touchscreen being referred to as a touchscreen, in the portal being referred to as a system, common parlance being just referred to as a touchscreen, even though it's a touchscreen all-in-one PC. We just, for shorthand, refer to it as a touchscreen, and how we discourage the use of the word tablet. And so we mentioned that those systems were touchscreens with GrandCare software. And here's an example of a touchscreen receiving that GrandCare software for the first time. But I mentioned these two things, even though we went over them last time, because we're going to add something in addition to what we learned before, which is the new concept that I'll describe by proposing the following scenario. What happens if something bad were to happen to a touchscreen? So just recently, I had heard an example of an individual at a home who had accidentally, it sounded like, kicked the touchscreen. And all of a sudden, the touchscreen was no longer working as expected. It was no longer operating as required. And so if we take the example of a touchscreen that is in Jen's bedroom, and all of a sudden it goes defunct, and it gets, for instance, it gets a pink screen, and it can no longer display the types of prompts or properly do a video call or the types of things that you would want to do with a touchscreen. what do we do then? Fortunately, we have the ability to transfer the identity of that previous touchscreen to a new piece of hardware. And the identity is what we call an account. If that touchscreen didn't have an account and it were just a system, then everything that had to do with that touchscreen would, in a sense, go away with it once it was defunct. But because there is this separate entity in the software referred to as an account, we are able to transfer everything that had gone into Jen's bedroom, all of those settings, all of those users that were associated taking care of Jen, all of the photos, all of the to-dos, all of the reports, and all of that data, we are now able to transfer to another piece of hardware, another system, because of this thing called an account. And the account is not something that is tangible. Again, it is a software entity that allows us to do things like this, to basically take the identity, the description, the configuration that was present in one touchscreen and put it onto another touchscreen. So it's that same account now in a new system. And so this is the new concept that I wanted to add to the previous concept that we had gone over last time, which was the system, the piece of hardware with the GrandCare software. Because after a touchscreen gets the software, there's that additional thing that happens. So after the touchscreen gets the GrandCare software and it becomes a system, then there's an additional thing that needs to happen. It gets an account right afterwards. And that's what you see there as an example on the right-hand side, is that same system now receiving an account with specific settings. And so previously, using the example, it was just a system with no identity. It had GrandCare software, but it didn't know what its purpose was, to whom it was going to go. And after it receives the account, all of a sudden, it knows, I am Jen's bedroom. I am Jen's bedroom touchscreen. And it's got Jen's information in there, and to-dos, and all sorts of data specific to Jen's bedroom touchscreen. And this account is what makes an inactive system into an active system. Accounts are set up, they are created in the portal. And this is normally not the task of most people who are providing direct support or remote support. Very often this is done by somebody who is an administrator who fills in the information about this account. So if this touchscreen is going to be going into Jen's bedroom, then perhaps the name of the touchscreen will be, the account will be Jen's bedroom. And every system, for it to operate, to be functional, to be used in the field as a touchscreen, requires an account. And so what you see here on the left-hand side is a system, a piece of hardware that does not have an account. And you see a button, an orange button there that says Assign Account. And then on the right-hand side, you see that same touchscreen, all of a sudden with an account. Jen's bedroom. This is my identity. I'm going to go into Jen's bedroom and be used with these to-dos and reminders and medication prompts and things like that. And the account very clearly here is a separate thing from the system. It's something that could even be removed, as you see in the bottom, in the orange button on the right-hand side, which is what you might want to do if you're a deployment support person who all of a sudden finds this particular piece of hardware, which is called System 315393. If that piece of hardware poops out or gets kicked or anything happens to it, you want to be able to remove the account from that system, from that hardware, and put it onto another system, perhaps System 315394, which you have handy with you. But it's that account that lives on in that second replacement system. So this is what it looks like in the portal when you're looking at an account on the left-hand side. This is the account summary. And you see the account name at the very top is Jen's Bedroom. And then at the bottom, you see in bigger text the name of the resident, Jen Member. And beneath that, you can see that under Jen's Bedroom status, when it comes to the system that goes with this account, it says there is no attached system. And so this is what would be a floating account, an account with no system. And that's what an account looks like right after you remove it from a system, from a piece of hardware. It just says that there's no attached system. And then after you've taken that account and you've placed it on a piece of hardware, let's say you've put it back onto another touchscreen, then you get what's on the right-hand side, which is the same account. But if you look at the very bottom, now it's got a system associated with it, System 315393. And so it's an account with a system, and this system is operational. And so one resident, just to go back to the same thing that we were saying before, but now using the terminology of residents and accounts, instead of saying one member can have multiple touchscreens, we can say that one resident can have multiple accounts in their home because one resident can have multiple touchscreens, and each of those touchscreens can have a separate and should have a separate identity or account. So Jen Member can have a Jen's Bedroom touchscreen, and Jen Member, the resident, can also have a Jen's Office touchscreen. One member, one resident, two touchscreens, two accounts. And so that list earlier, that list of touchscreens that we saw earlier of Jen's Bedroom and Jen's Office, I just basically pulled up the snapshot to include more of it. What we were really looking at was a list of accounts. And you see the names of the accounts, Jen's Bedroom, Jen's Office, but you also see the ID, the identification for the particular system or touchscreen, that 6-digit number, because they are separate touchscreens. So the first touchscreen has a system ID of 315393, and the second touchscreen has an ID of 316697, and its identity and its account is Jen's Office, whereas the first one's identity, its account, was Jen's Bedroom. And so just putting it together in the situation where a supported person is receiving care from a remote support person, in this case, through the touchscreen, the terminology is as follows. The member receiving support is the resident. The person providing support remotely or through the portal to the touchscreen in the room is the user. And the touchscreen is a system, a piece of hardware with an identity, with an account.